More on that shortly. But first, a bit of housekeeping. Before we get going, a quick housekeeping notes. Please keep your microphones muted unless you are asked to speak. This will help us to keep the audio clean for everyone. The chat is open and you are more than welcome to use it. We want to hear from you, your thoughts on the session. If you have a question for the panel, drop it in the chat and our team will pick it up when we get to the Q&A. Today's session will be recorded and will be shared with everyone who has registered for the event. So if a colleague has missed it, you are able to share it with them. We have some wonderful prizes in line for today from our generous sponsors, from Castrol, MAG, Master Drive, the Optics Group. So keep an eye on the chat. We will be announcing winners during our close. At this juncture, I want to hand over to the president and founding member of the Association of Fleet Professionals here in South Africa, Mr. Eugene Herbert, to take it away. Thank you so much and have yourself a wonderful webinar going forward.
Jonathan, thank you for that introduction. But just before we kick off, I'm sure you've probably heard this saying, being a fleet manager is easy. You just solve problems you didn't create using budgets you don't control. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being part of this important milestone, the soft launch of AFP. But before we get into the detail, I'd like to just sketch very briefly the South African automotive landscape, because today we're in an area where the landscape is dynamic, competitive, and more complex than what it's ever been. Consumers, fleet managers have access to more than 70 vehicle brands across SUV, light commercial, and bakkie segments. In addition to that, we have 20 truck and commercial vehicle brands, and of course, we have the ongoing new entrants from Asia and the like. There's approximately 16 vehicle models currently available that's produced by local OEMs. So when we have a look at what the challenges are, we have to appreciate that things are changing. At the same time as that rapid expansion, we see new electric vehicles, whether it's in plug-in hybrid, full EV, or a hybrid. These are entering the market at a phenomenal rate. And what is worth noting is that these vehicles are no longer only available in the premium brands, but rather they're open to a broad cross-section of the public. And therefore it has an impact on fleets, whether it be rental or otherwise. And alongside this, we see a dynamic and engaging fleet ecosystem. It is estimated there are between 30 to 50 telematics and fleet management service providers locally. And if we have a look at that market, currently it represents about 47% of commercial fleet vehicles that it engage with. But it is estimated that by 2028, this will go to about 70%. By that time, who will know of the tachograph? Fleet operators are faced with multiple challenges, whether it's technology, suppliers, data platforms, mobility solutions, and then, of course, vehicle options. This growing diversity of vehicle brands, technology, operating models needs a trusted platform, credible information, and professional collaboration now more than ever before. The increasing complexity of fleet management is no longer something that can be just handled by an administrator. Whether you're managing 10 or 10,000 vehicles, fleet professionals are expected to do the following, at least, amongst others: safety and risk, cost control, compliance and governance, sustainability, technology integration, driver behavior, as well as the well-being of those people driving the vehicles. And then, of course, we have two others which are of critical importance: procurement, life cycle management, and operational efficiency. Yet, despite this complexity of fleet management, there has not as yet, up until this point in time, been a single organization that existed that could support these individuals in their challenging role across the entire spectrum, from motorbike to heavy vehicle. But before we go into some of the detail, let's just share the journey of AFP. I must admit and give cognizance to the fact that if this were not for the Fleet Safety Awards that Master Drive introduced during the height of COVID, this institution, this association would probably not have been here. But it was with the support of our partners, very many of them loyal and still with us today, that we gained some insight into the industry, engagement, information, and the growing data that was available and that was not being used adequately by individuals who manage significant large fleets. The need, therefore, for a dedicated body to support fleet managers and the broader industry became apparent. Conversations had with partners, partnerships we created, the research that we did, both locally and abroad, and the industry participation generated through FSA, it became clear that what was needed was the following. And notice there's 6 points that we'll talk to. A trusted professional platform for fleet practitioners, greater collaboration between fleet operators and suppliers, the individuals supplying vehicles, technology, etc., into fleet management, access to shared best practices and credible industry knowledge, and an ongoing professional development opportunities. This was needed for the two following reasons: to create a stronger professional identity for fleet managers, one that would be recognized along that of doctors and other professionals. And then, of course, the last one is a community focused on raising standards across the industry. If you have a look at various associations, they represent a broad cross-section of things, from road safety to those who challenge driving under the influence. This realization led to the creation of AFP. So the purpose of AFP then, let's talk to that for a moment. And this is really important. And it's somewhat unique to South Africa, that most existing organizations in South Africa represent manufacturers, dealers, leasing companies, rental operators, suppliers, and logistics operators, as well as technical and possibly regulatory sectors. Historically, fewer focused on that of the fleet manager as a profession. The gap, therefore, has created this opportunity for us to engage with fleet managers through the body called AFP. And today is less about launching another industry body. We have so many of them, but more about creating a platform where professional home is there for fleet practitioners and trusted industry partners who share a common goal. There are three simple areas that we will talk to raise standards, grow capability, and strengthen the fleet profession in South Africa. There is at times, of course, the anecdotal perception within the parts of the industry that some fleet procurement environments can be vulnerable to conflicts of interest, preferential supplier relationships, or poor governance. Whether this is justified or not, these perceptions exist, and therefore fleet management needs to make sure that the areas that they engage in, which is significant capital spend, supplier selection and tender processes, vehicle repurchasing cycles, maintenance tires, and all the other ancillary items that they put into their fleets. And then, of course, the last one, which of course is subject to significant abuse, disposal and remarketing decisions. This is precisely why professionalism, ethics, transparency, and best practice matters. It is a known fact that globally, in markets such as the UK, Australia, and parts of Europe, fleet managers are increasingly being recognized as mobility, operational, and risk professionals rather than simply vehicle administrators. Across these mature markets, associations like AFP have played an important role in helping fleet professionals build meaningful careers through collaboration, shared best practice, continuous learning, professional development, access to credible industry expertise, and exposure to trusted suppliers and solutions. This is very much the vision of AFP. So what AFP intends to become, and it will be covered a little bit more in detail with our general manager, it wants to accomplish four important areas: to be a platform where like-minded individuals, professionals can connect, learn, and grow. A place where fleet managers can sharpen their skills and engage openly with peers facing similar challenges, such as which is an ideal telematics or fleet management provider. It should also be a credible source of industry knowledge, insight, and best practice, and a professional community that is focused on improving standards across the fleet industry. Equally important, AFP aims to create a space for trusted suppliers and solution providers to engage constructively with the fleet community, not in a purely competitive environment, but as partners committed to solving the real challenges that they face at an operational level. We want to work with providers who have integrity, quality, relevance, innovation, long-term relationships, and offer a meaningful contribution to fleet success. So in looking ahead, ultimately, AFP should help professionalize the fleet industry in South Africa, not only by improving knowledge and standards, but by building a stronger, more credible community around the people responsible for keeping businesses, employees, and economies moving every day. This soft launch is the beginning of that journey. So thank you to everyone who supported the vision so far, and to all you who are here because you believe there is value in building something that is collaborative, credible, and future-focused together. We look forward to shaping that future of fleet management together with you. And the last thought, the driver says to the fleet manager, "Good news, I fixed the tachometer." The fleet manager says, "How?" The driver, "I put tape over the red zone." So with that, I'd like to introduce to you our General Manager, Nigel Webb.
Hey, good morning to you all. And Eugene, thank you very much indeed for that introduction. Um, One thing that Eugene didn't tell you about me was that in my early days of fleet management, and we were promoting the project of full maintenance leasing, and I had the privilege of being interviewed by a very good journalist. But the problem was that the final story was that he said, as a consequence of full maintenance leasing, fleet manager's job was gone. There would be no room for fleet managers. So I was very embarrassed. He was wrong. And today, if you look at what fleet management is today, um, you realize that the fleet management industry is becoming a very important industry. You control a massive amount of costs. You have a huge amount of skill. Um, so yeah, so that's the fleet management industry today, and this is probably why we should be very excited about AFP, because the objective of AFP is to bring skill, understanding, connectivity to this industry. The thing, of course, is that the industry has grown massively in recent years. It's become very complex. Um, it's the numbers that are in play are quite significant. And in fact, truthfully, I think the industry is greatly underrated. So let's have a look at some numbers here. These are numbers I put forward, and a lot of people don't readily accept it. But let's go through the numbers. If you buy a car today for 400,000, you put it on the road, assuming you finance it, period of 4 years, you've got to pay for fuel, you have to pay for maintenance, you have to pay your insurance. But my calculations show that that vehicle is costing you as a company, as operators, it's costing you 150,000 Rand per month, over 12,000 Rand a month to run that vehicle. Okay. But of course, you'll argue that that's a brand new vehicle. So if you look at the average because of the age mix, let's bring that number back to 120,000. So I would say to you that every single vehicle in your fleet, light commercial and passengers, excluding the heavies, is costing you about 10,000 Rand a month. If you're running a fleet, for argument's sake, 50 vehicles, you've got a budget. You have a budget of 6 million Rand a year. And I sometimes think that you are not given the recognition that is due to you as a consequence of that large number. But what I would say, of course, is that you're managing large budgets like that, because many of you are not managing fleets of 50, you're managing fleets into the hundreds. You are controlling massive budgets, and the opportunities for efficiency, the opportunities for saving are there, and they need to be found, they need to be exploited. Anyway, so it's with that background that we're here today, and this is why the AFP event I consider to be amongst the most exciting and important events for our fleet industry. Okay, AFP South Africa is modelled on the UK and the US, as Eugene said. You go to the UK, you've got AFP UK, 1,600 members, and they are controlling within the UK a fleet of approximately 15 million vehicles. Okay, I beg your pardon, 5 million. I'm sorry. The important thing about the AFP UK is that they have massive communication with each other, and importantly, they're communicating with government. They're saying to government, we don't like these taxes. You're not giving consideration to these. And importantly, these people at the coalface, and they're the ones who actually know the impact of events and trends, and it's important that they communicate that to government. In the US, for argument's sake, over 2,000 members. They have an industry fleet of about 15 million vehicles. Massive, massive. But the most wonderful thing about the US one is they've got a range of certification courses. So these courses are designed in a way to aid the fleet professionals in learning more, gaining more influence, and they address a whole lot of things: business and financial management, they IT, fuel, maintenance management, and most critically, professional development. So they're actually saying to their members, we'll give you every ounce of support that we can through our training programs to give you a skill set that enables you um, to positively develop your industry. Anyway, those are big targets, and they're not with us yet. We are not there yet, but we certainly aspire to achieve these goals. So then, okay, let's say what then is the goal of FSV, okay? The goal of FPSA is really to it's to give learning opportunities to our participants, to give the service providers, to give them the opportunity to participate in the market, to talk to our market. It's endless. The industry is massive, and we want to give everyone the opportunity to interface, engage, and learn. So really, that is the goal of PSA. But now, talking about participation, I always ask these questions, and I truthfully get the same answer too often. I ask fleet managers, do you participate in the preparation of your organization's fleet budgets? So as I said a moment ago, you're running 50 vehicles, 6 million rand annual budget. And to be honest with you, I don't think many of you are participating in the preparation of your budgets. And the challenge must be, why are there so few of you? And similarly, we've got legislation now. We've got R2 here with us now. And yes, there's been lots of change of thought on that. But the long story is that you as fleet managers have very strong opinions about this. Have you in any way participated or communicated your thoughts? So this is what we want AFP to do. Become a channel where you can in fact start communicating that. Okay, so here we go. So we aim to provide education and training. Interestingly, over the next 12 months, we have a series of 12 monthly training courses. They're free for members. We're going to start at the basics. We're doing one shortly in a couple of weeks' time. We're going to go and look at the basics of fleet registers and move into fleet audits. Um, and then what we're going to do over the next 12 months is we're going to talk about the complexity of the finance options. We're going to look at replacement planning and budgeting. We're looking at cost management. Fuel today is talking point, no doubt. Maintenance should always be there. And funnily enough, with my experience in the fleet management industry, I would say to you, maintenance management is probably one of the easiest places to save money on your fleet budget. And the other thing then, of course, is to look at telematics. Again, a wonderful product, enormously useful to fleet operators, but I sometimes feel that it's not fully utilized. Massive opportunities for efficiency, massive opportunities for cost saving. And additionally, as part of our education and training program, we will provide specialist attendance courses that provided by experts addressing financial, technical, operating leads in a more detailed manner than the 12-month online courses. We're also going to do webinars and events. Today is a case in point where we're addressing three subjects that are massively important: fuel prices, the imported motor vehicles, and of course the transition to new energy vehicles. All right. We also want to have membership from all sectors of the fleet industry. We are looking for fleet operators, managers, company managers, service and product providers to participate with us in AFP. The service providers, particularly, they have so much knowledge about trends and cost management structures and things like this. So we wish to encourage their participation because they add huge value to the fleet industry. All right, we have a benefits matrix, which we've been prepared over a couple of months. There's a lot of detail gone into it. We have 6 categories of membership, and each category is going to receive real benefits through learning, presentations, resource expertise, networking, and members' interaction. So, long story short, we're in the verge of presenting to the South African fleet industry a very exciting and a very beneficial organization in AFP. So we're excited. I'm particularly excited. So I think let's give it every support we can and use every opportunity that it presents. All right. Okay, so that concludes my introduction. I truly hope you're as excited as I am. What we need to do now, of course, is to hand over to Eugene, who is going to have the panel discussion about fuel, imported vehicles, and new energy vehicles. And this is a massively important subject. It is affecting us in the fleet industry today. And funnily enough, I read a fleet article this morning that came out of the UK dedicated to the impact of new energy vehicle, of imported Asian vehicles on the European UK fleet market. These are topical subjects that are shared all over the world. So let me hand you over to Eugene. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. And I'm sure that Nigel just touched very briefly on all of the things that we'll be able to do and can do within AFP. But just before we go into our panel discussion, I will invite the panelists on in a moment. But just with reference to the poll that you did, of those questions that were posed, more than 73% indicated that the cost of running a fleet today in terms of fuel is the biggest challenge that they have, then followed in equal measure by all the other things. So with that thought in mind, I'm going to invite our panelists to join us. We have Jacques from Optics, Dex from KPMG, and then Tembi from NADA. Please do join us, and we will then follow on the discussion and pose a few questions for each one to consider in turn. So Jacques, welcome to us. Dex, welcome as well. And then, of course, we've got Tembi. And I'm so glad that you dressed down for the occasion. If you'd like to put your mics on, please, so that we can engage with you in a few moments. But I think that poll that we did is a sure indication of the biggest challenges that we face in the fleet today. And it's appropriate, therefore, Jacques, that we're going to address our first question to you. But just a brief exercise I did it on a fleet, rigs running maybe 20 of them, covering 15,000 kilometers a month. And I did a quick calculation over the last 2 months. The fuel increase has added 1.53 million to their monthly budget. So the question to you, Jacques, is, in this world that we live in today, what, based on your experience, and you come from a unique background from Unitrans, so you were at the face of the coal face, as it were, and now where you're managing technology in the background, what is there that effective fleet managers can do now to reduce their exposure, and what is available to them in the next 3 years?
Thank you, Eugene. Appreciate it. Firstly, thank you so much for the inclusion. Definitely a privilege. And wishing you and the fellow AFP members all the success in the future. I think there's a lot of value to be added and to be received by collateral usage. So to get straight into the answer, I believe for South African fleet managers, there are lots of levers currently available for implementation. However, I think the reason why the savings aren't showing up is A, the selection of the sequence in which those levers or technologies or processes are implemented. Usually the implementation that goes is we start looking at the strategic layer first. So those would be your fuel management information systems, your fuel cards, your tank monitoring. We then start focusing on the operational level, which looks at your route optimization, telematics, and idling control. And then only do we go to where I believe personally in my experience we should start, which is the driver behind the wheel. The driver is the fuel level. Everything else really comes in as amplification. So if we look at the data for just a second on a commercial fleet at the moment, and Nigel and yourself shared some riveting numbers with regards to fuel increases and also the larger impact from overarching fuel cost and ownership models. If we look at fleet today, the difference between your best driver and your worst driver in the experience that we've seen globally is anything between a 10 to 20% fuel consumption change. And that's a consistent measurement. It's not a South African measurement, it's a global implementation. The reason why I highlight that number is if you do not have a driver program in place, real-time in-cab coaching, focusing on post-trip reviews and video evidence, driver scorecards, and to a certain extent, at times it does work to have a really good incentive program, you're not going to be able to achieve that 8 to 12% on your fuel bill, the saving. And that saving is sustained, not a one-time win. If you can sustain that saving by engaging with your driver effectively over a 12-month period, it really becomes a value add on top of the line of your operational expense. The capex is low, payback 60 to 90 days, and the technology to do that is not only currently available, but has matured over the past decade. So why don't fleet managers do this? I think predominantly 2 reasons. It requires a change in how we run our operations. And it's also the initial investment on the systems and the platforms is a large capital investment from a strategic perspective. So inherently, we want to lean into that first. I think where we should start is on the driver side. So if we start on the driver side and we lean into that first 8 to 12% that we're consistently seeing on a sustained measurement, from there we go into the operational management. Now, this is where I believe most of the South African fleet actually live today. Telematics in our country, I've found from a global exposure, is actually quite mature. Lots of competing entities and brands, everybody predominantly good at what they're doing. Looking at idling alerts, geofence shutoffs, speed management, harsh acceleration, harsh braking. The problem in our experience is not necessarily the tools. The problem is that the tools are generating data, and the data only manages if you use that data to apply it to behavioral change. fleet managers are looking for idling reports on a Monday morning. But if they don't use that idling reports on a Monday morning directly with the driver within the 24, 48-hour period, it's simply a report, and the savings don't materialize. That's why the best way that you do it is if you include the driver behavioral program, working with the driver, the operator of the fleet, alongside a very strong telematics platform or FMIS system that you implement. And then once the first two are fully integrated, you move into tier 3. Tier 3 is then obviously your strategy system. And these are your large-scale fuel management information systems, your fuel cards, tank monitoring, integrated reporting. Usually that's where most of the fuel owners and the fleet managers, commence, because it's a visible investment. It's a lot of genuine strategic value as well, but you can't run a fleet at scale without it, which makes sense to us. The trap is, however, that tier 3 on its own needs investments on these large-scale platforms and technologies focusing on the fuel usage itself. Gives you visibility on usage. It doesn't necessarily curb ineffective usage of the fleet itself, and therefore your savings you don't see as quickly. The savings happens at tier 1. If you've spent the capex on the dashboard before you've done work with the driver, you've really bought a report without earning the result. So the answer in short, after quite a lengthy explanation there, is this: that most fleet managers at the moment are investing in dashboards before they have the discipline in the organization, and then we wonder why we don't have the savings. The cheapest liter of fuel is the one that your driver doesn't burn. And I know a little bit later on, we're going to be leaning into the AI discussion. So when we start combining these 3 tiers with an overlaying layer of automated intelligence, that's where I believe the real value proposition commences.
Jacques, thank you very much. That's comprehensive. You've probably answered 50 people's questions in this short discussion that we've had today. But just before I get to some comments from Thembi and from Dex, Jacques, I'm sure that when you look at what you've uncovered in the various roles that you looked at, in some instances, there's ignorance about the dashboard that people are buying, correct? There's, I think, 30 to 50 telematics or fleet management providers. And this, I believe, is what we intend for AFP to do, is to help provide intelligent information to facilitate discussions. Thembi, would you like to go first? And then we'll follow with Dex. Any comments on this?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Thanks to the panelists and thanks for inviting us. I think Jacques have really gave a full, detailed, comprehensive, way of managing the crisis of the fuel costs in the country. Of course, I'm not in the fleet management space, but I'm on the dealer operation space with the different franchises in the country and also on the after sale side of things. And the fuel costs in the country have affected dealers and operation. And it is something that we've watched and monitor very closely as NADA, simply because whenever there's a fuel hike, we start to see the sales numbers drop, or whenever there's going to be a fuel price announcement, the dealer and our partners, they start to see customers holding back in terms of making decision on purchasing. Customer will come into the business, into a dealership, they do the finance application, they do the test drive with the particular car, all happy, ready to sign. But the minute there's going to be an AA announcement on fuel price and also interest rate, customers hold back immediately. And I think that to the point of Jacques, on the fleet side of things, the driver behavior I think is critical. Yes, you can put all systems in place to try and manage this particular cost, but I think it boils down to the driver and how they manage their trips and how they move around and all of that. The unfortunate thing is that we are living in the world that we're in now of global players, making decisions that affects the most important mineral, which is the oil at the moment. And the least we can't change that, but the least we can do is to come up with measures to say, how does businesses manage this particular expense, which can be very, very, very costly. in each and every business. So I think Jacques have given a detail into how things can be done, but fuel prices and fuel hikes, we do feel them even in our deal environment.
Thanks, Tembi. A few short words, Dex, if you'd like to add something, or you can elaborate further when we deal with your aspect of the panel discussion. You happy with
Absolutely.
that?
Yeah, definitely. So first and foremost, thanks everybody for the opportunity to be here. And I think let me add two comments. One, from a behavioral and a cultural perspective, and two, around either reactive management through technology or proactive management through technology. So, from a cultural perspective, and if you had to look at it globally, and depending on the geographical regions that you look at, that consumption of, or the benefit of 12% from a fuel usage perspective differs quite significantly. For example, in the Far Eastern regions, that number is a lot smaller versus more Western geared, or Africa as an example. And the reason for that is because the people that you're working with have got different ethnic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, the way that they see they need to do their work. And that has a significant impact on the way that they ultimately would sit there, as an example, idling the vehicles. So on the one side, training is an important lever to pull, but it's also quite difficult when there's those cultural overlays that affects people's behavior. So I think that's something we do need to perhaps consider, and it could be perhaps unpacked as part of our conversation today. And then the second point I'd like to highlight as part of a brief comment is really around the technology. I think having telematics and dashboards and all this information is really useful, but in the face of how people behave, that information isn't necessarily as effective as it could be. And I think that's where the role of electrification starts coming in, because the benefit of having an electrified drivetrain and all of that power available to you is you can start driving some very complex systems to help augment human behavior so that it can potentially steer it towards a more beneficial outcome for the business. As an example, this is without even going towards, having an electric vehicle, truck on the ground which doesn't idle. You could actually have autonomous driving systems that would actually assist you in, for example, cutting the engine when there's an extended amount of idling that would be happening versus not. And those are all systems which would be brought in through further electrification that's being brought into the systems themselves. So I think the second point is really around what available technologies can we start engaging on the ground here that we're already starting to see globally being adopted that would really allow for a more efficient way of utilizing our resources. And I think that's a really important consideration as part of looking at fleet.
Thanks, Dex.
It's a combination of those three levels, right? It's not necessarily trying to pick one. The optimist, the golden spoon solution is how do you integrate all three? And I think very much to Dex's point, almost your regional changes with regards to where you find yourself in the world. There's various levels of implementation across each of the tiers, but the end game is to be as optimized as you can by integrating all three.
Thanks, guys. Let's just move into the next section, which is what Dex is starting to touch on, the new energy vehicles. Tembi, you're at NADA. You must see things from a regulatory and a government perspective. What do you think, aside from, the SAM 2035 and APDP program, what things could be assisted in order to get things up and running? Because my calculations for a 20-vehicle fleet, mixed EVs specifically, it's going to cost you anything from 20 to 30 million rand to implement as a fleet operator. What is needed by way of support?
No, thank you so much, Eugene. I think that's a great question. I think if I can just start by saying that the transition that we're seeing in the automotive sector in the country, I think is something that first of all is refreshing, and also it shifts the automotive sector into the new level. When I say new level, we are starting now to see the NEV, new energy vehicles coming into the country. And also we start to see a good competition within the particular OEMs. I just want to take it back quickly. In the month of April, right? The total vehicle sales in the country were about 47,979, which is the highest number since 2013, which is pre-COVID. And in the last 2 years, we've been tracking the number as NADA in terms of how are vehicle sales doing and also what is shifting in the numbers, right? And if you talk about 2025 versus 2026 vehicle sales, talk about a 13% increase, which is fantastic. But now when you start to unpack these numbers, we're saying, okay, what is really happening? What is really happening is that the Asian brands have come aggressively in the market, in the country. And also what we've also seen is that the new energy vehicles, they've increased by almost 200% in vehicle sales year on year. 4,000 to 5,000 more vehicles were sold in the month of April. And then when you start to looking at the numbers, and then you start to look at your legacy brands, how are they doing vis-a-vis what these Asian brands are doing? And the Asian brands, they're coming in quite strong. And also there's 4 or 5 of these Asian brands, they are sitting in the top 10 vehicles sold in South Africa. And of that, the plug-in hybrids, the EVs and the NEVs, they are coming very strong. Now, from a government point of view, and this is something that NAD and RMI have been pushing, with, of course, NAMSA, which is the Automotive Business Council, is to say the government have to really, really step up in terms of bringing incentives for the OEMs, right, and rebates for the OEMs to bring these vehicles at the right price, so that they can be sold at the right price. And also players like yours in the AFP, the fleet companies, they can also start to have these vehicles at the right cost in order for them to of course, to make profits and also to grow their business, sustain their business, and keep the economy going. So our CEO of RMI, they went as far as going to Parliament and to discuss these possibilities and opportunities, and also really to put, honestly and truly, to put pressure on the government. I was in the United States for the NADA show, and one of the biggest things that were discussed, there was the new energy vehicles and how countries like your Norways and the likes, they are sitting at about 98% sales on new energy vehicles, simply because the government have put policies and incentive in place to really encourage the OEMs to invest in new energy vehicle. And I think the pressure needs to be put into our government to really change the mindset into allowing these NEVs to come into the country, and also, most importantly, to have these manufacturing investing in the country. We've got the infrastructures in this country, and we are the biggest player in the continent when it comes to automotive. So we want this OEM to come in and invest, and also invest in new energy vehicles. Thank you.
Thembi, thank you very much for that, and I appreciate those insights, and I think that viewers here today will take away some questions. Dex and Jacques, I'm just going to frame the next question to Thembi again, and then we can have your input on both components. Thembi, just having a look at what this means for dealerships, how fleet managers are going to be able to engage. What do you think their expectations could be of dealerships in terms of introducing new energy vehicles, and also those Asian brands which are now being taken up by government in tenders, etc.? Give us a short comment on that, please, and then we'll go to Dex and Jacques.
Yeah, look. I think the entrance of the Asian brands in the country, first of all, is good. It's good in the sense that it, from the dealer point of view, it offers consumers options, knowing very well that currently our economy is not growing. Right, 0.9%, 1%, that is absolutely nothing. It doesn't move the needle. It's just a stats that make things look as if things are okay, but things are not okay. Now, the financial constraint and distress that the consumers are feeling, including the companies, it needed something. And these Asian brands came with that alternative. That's what we call it. And I think these alternatives, they are also very, very good for fleet companies and fleet managers. Because right now you can, have a solution that you can bring to the table for your client to shift, let's say, from combustion engine, balance their fleet book, and have some, energy vehicles and EVs and the likes. Hence, I was saying earlier on, it is important that we put pressure on the government to come up with rebates, tax rebates, and incentives to drive these energy vehicles to come into the market. And I think this new energy vehicle, more especially the plug-in hybrid, I'm also I'm not a petrol head, but I love my combustion engine. But at the same time, I need to move with the times, and the times are talking about electric cars. So what we've seen with the plug-in hybrids, there's a massive spike in terms of the interest in there, because you still have your combustion engine, and then of course you've got your new energy, like in the form of a battery, and so on and so forth, in terms of electrification of this vehicle. And to put those two together, you get a longer range than you will have been if it was just a EV or if it was a combustion engine. And I think that, for me, the plug-in hybrids are really, really fantastic options to look at for the fleet managers.
So, Temba, you're going to have to give up your Rolls Royce to go EV, eh? Okay, so just before we go to you, Dex, for comment on the previous question as well as this one, what we've seen, noting, and Nigel will no doubt confirm it, amongst fleet managers, there's a lot of uncertainty about residual values in terms of the Asian brands. Let's talk about them in general. But then, of course, when we talk about the EVs, whether it's a plug-in hybrid, whatever, and we know that what is critical to one of those vehicles is the battery, the state of health, I think the terminology is. And I don't know that fleet managers have got to grips with that as yet. And this is one of the platforms that we're going to address that. Dex, give us your comment on both, please.
Happy to do so. But maybe let me take a bit of a detour before I get to answering those questions. And I'd like to specifically touch on, the way that we view the transition. So, and what I mean by this is as follows. This event that we're seeing with the fuel prices isn't something new. We've seen this over the last however many decades. Oil shocks in the 80s, for example, and it goes up until modern day. Every single time we've got some sort of geopolitical event that transpires, we get the knock-on effect, even if it's not to our own doing, and then we have to suffer the consequences. So I think the lens that we need to be applying to those conversations, we say, sure, on a per business perspective, we need to think about, going forward, how to electrify, how do we make it more sustainable, how do we manage our costs? But from a government side, I think the lens that has to be applied is really to say, how do we ensure that our economy is insulated from these external events which continuously impact us? And I think, unlike in the 80s, right now, the tools that we need to allow for this to happen is available. We've got renewable energy that can be produced on the ground in South Africa, all the way from the sun that we've got available to us. The vehicle classes that needs to be available to take advantage of that type of fuel source is starting to come into play. The infrastructure that is starting to roll out on the ground is getting to the point where electrified drivetrains are slowly but surely becoming even, viable. I think if you look at the recent announcements over the last week or two on the electrification of the N3 corridor, that is an indication around the fact that slowly but surely the environment is starting to allow us to, look at those alternatives. So as part of us, looking at the fleet of commercial vehicles that has been run by fleet managers, there needs to be a conversation had to say, sure, there is perhaps at this stage an upfront cost that we need to consider. But how do we as a business also insulate ourselves from being impacted so significantly that every single time these events come into play, it means that our balance sheet goes from black all the way into the red? And I think that is an important conversation that we do need to have as part of setting the context on why we need to be heading in a certain direction. Now, with that being said, and let me touch on the RV conversation, that's unfortunately one of those facts that we cannot avoid. I mean, me personally, I'm an electric vehicle driver. And I had a very unfortunate realization that 2 years into owning my EV, I just wanted to understand how much I could sell my vehicle for. And I was given a price which was 35% of the sticker price that I paid for my vehicle within a 2-year time period for an EV. So this is, on a personal basis, this was a shock, just by the way. But I mean, for fleet managers who need to manage large vehicle fleets, those type of conversations is pretty much a non-starter. But then you have to ask yourself a question around, why is it a non-starter? And it's because we are approaching it from the perspective of thinking about EVs almost like the way we do with ICE vehicles. And we do have to consider the fact that EVs we can run for longer. EVs, there's less maintenance. From the battery conversation, the battery state of health, the SOH, that's not a conversation anymore. We know for a fact, based on real world uses, that most of these batteries will pretty much outlast the chassis, there's shock absorbers, pretty much everything within the vehicles themselves, to the point where you'll most likely end up having a second and a third life on these batteries before it actually becomes irrelevant for the fleet managers. So when you take all of those things into account, I think the environment, including the technology itself, has gotten to the point where it needs serious consideration. But what is missing right now is really the focus from a government's perspective. And the government really has to look at it from the long-term viability of our economy and our country. And through that lens, they need to start thinking about how to stimulate demand.
Dex, thank you. That was certainly, by the way, you haven't escaped. We're going to be talking about some of your trips that you did. By the way, when it comes to that, I don't know whether you deserve my congratulations or condolences, because that must have been one hang of a trip. Jacques, please weigh in. And if you've got any info on maybe the heavy vehicle side.
Thanks, Eugene. I think if we go to the EV discussion, I think for large fleet managers, predominantly in the transport sector, I think everybody sees where the industry is moving and has an idea as to what the end game is that we're chasing towards. In my experience, the largest difference in the transport side from a third and a first world country is that length of period between solution ideation and solution execution. I think the idea with regards to the electrification of the entry is the perfect one. Between having the solid plan and when that actually transpires in a country that predominantly moves slower from an implementation idea perspective, I think there's a time period that will still force the fleet owners to be predominantly diesel orientated. So I think that needs to be considered. I think the infrastructure, the speed at which the infrastructure is currently developing is behind the availability of the units and the fleet themselves. And that's definitely going to hold the discussion back. And then adoption rates, which is again going back to the human factor. I think predominantly in the transport sector side, and forgive me for not knowing the number, how long transport in South Africa has been a predominant sector. But the move towards newer technologies and newer implementations and new ideas does take predominantly longer from implementation and adopting to that solution. So I think everybody's moving in the right direction. We all know what that direction is. I do think there's a time period with regards to when we get there versus your countries like the Europeans, the UKs, and the Americans.
Thanks, Jacques. Sorry, Tembi, I'll be with you in a moment. Dex, you mentioned the 80s. You know, in 76, we had fuel restrictions where you could only travel between 6 and 6, but you probably were in a crib at the time, so you wouldn't know about that, all right? Tembi, any comments there that just in concluding, short one, before we move back to Jacques?
Yeah, no, Kukan, I think the issue of the EV cars and the price, right, as Dex have mentioned, even for me, it was quite, in fact, for all of us at NADA, and it was quite a shocker to see, the resale values of these EV cars. Hence, then, these Asian companies, I will be specific with the Chinese, for instance, they came up with the alternatives. Now, also what we've seen is that the OEMs that are now, the Chinese OEM that are starting to invest in the country, right, they are also creating a used car market for those particular vehicles. If you look at Chery, for instance, they're talking about now Cherished, which is a used, which is a pre-owned vehicle, a program for pre-owned, specifically looking at the resale values of the cars. However, the car park is not yet there in terms of getting these cars into the used car space in order to get a demand for it, and subsequently the resale value will be better. But they're quite smart, these guys. They are now starting to work into that space to say, let's work on making sure that the resale value of these vehicles is good, and that myself and Dex are going to sit with 35 or 40% loss in the space of a year. So there is something that is happening, and it's encouraging to see that they're paying focus on that as well. So Rato, let me just add that 2 cents worth.
Just while you think about this answer, you can just leave the EV at home and plug in the power. You won't have a problem with Eskom power, right? The cheapest small EV at the moment is a BYD, correct, Dolphin? What's the price on that? No, sorry, Dex.
No, it's actually the Geely E2. That's the cheapest on the market right now. And then the Geely E2, it's the Aspire model. I think it was just around the 340K mark, give or take, which is very competitive.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's close to the 300,000 mark, Dex. So yeah,
Yes.
spot on.
Okay.
Gili is the cheapest.
That's pocket change for you, Tembi, so it's okay. All right, just just before we move on to Jacques, and we were talking about the important aspect of data. Now, you made reference to it in your initial conversation, but if we have a look at where telematics and fleet management, and I know sometimes those two get a little bit confused. South Africa is one of the more mature markets, I'm sure you'll agree. So when you start looking at the data that you start harvesting, how far is the South African fleet sector in making the shift to predictive, data-driven operations where the use of AI, and I think optics is one of the leaders there, reduces the pressures and what's the cost of holding vehicles? And if we're not there, what's holding us back?
Thanks, Eugene. Just a quick touch back on that first answer. So if we go back to the idea of the three different layers, the potential combination of all three in order to get the real value, artificial intelligence and automation across operation is really the glue that binds the three together. I've got a different view with regards to where we've placed ourselves in how far we've progressed from an AI side. I don't think South Africa in the fleet sector is necessarily behind. I think the adoption rate is unevenly spread. If you look at the leaders in our market, the large mining houses, the big logistics operators, the large retail distributions, they do this at scale. And currently, you have predictive territory today that's implemented. Predictive fatigue scoring, predictive collision risk, predictive maintenance, and that's live in production today at scale. The middle of the market is predominantly on the descriptive side. They have the data, they have the reports, but they don't necessarily use that in a forward-looking motion. And then the tail end is really where it sits, more reactive. Incident has to occur first before data is analyzed relevant to the incident. I don't think that we're necessarily behind. It's just if we can reduce the difference between the tail and the lead, I think that's really where the economy and the industry and the fleet industry as themselves move forward faster. So if I can give you a concrete example of that, for the leaders in the space, in-cab artificial intelligence that scores driver fatigue in real time before a driver knows that they're fatigued. And these are technologies that are deployed at scale, like I've said. This is not a pilot, not roadmap. It's currently running at scale. That's available. So when we look at AI in fleet itself, we're not saying that it's something that's coming in years. The top quartile of the market is already using it. We have to then ask ourselves, what is the reason why everybody's not at that level? And I think that's predominantly three reasons. The one being data fragmentation. We have a lot of fleet operators, regardless of size, that are constantly being bombarded by multiple suppliers and vendors of various technologies. Each of those technologies great in their own use. The ability to integrate that to a central message or central point of contact, I think is missing. And that becomes almost daunting for a transport manager that has 100 circa fleet that he needs to manage, because it's just another thing that he needs to do in order to make his business effective. So I think that's a prohibitor. Secondly is the operational readiness. The way in which we operate our fleet and our businesses at large, I think, is really one of the key considerations. AI generates the prediction, but the prediction is not really worth much if someone that is not using that in the operations team to actually make use of it. The core functionality that I think we really need to lean into here is that, sorry, give me a second. One of the core functionalities that's really making an impact on that aspect is, in order to maximize the daily routine of the current user, we need to make sure that your coaching cadences are in place, the escalation playbooks are in place. And if you map that according to the technology requirement, that's really where the value is. It's not operating model on its own. It's having the operating model effectively in the business. You need to unify that with your data layer, have a 360 view of your business as a whole by having these various sources of technology that comes together, and then really leaning into the trust side. Trust comes with time. So the usage of these multiple technologies and AI, you have to use it in order to see where it's giving you the functionality and making you better. Nigel mentioned earlier the conversation that he had with the report 2 years ago, and I don't want to misquote, but it came down to the fact that the role of a fleet manager is finite and it's coming to an end. I don't believe even at AI level that's the case. I think the immediate benefit for AI is it's going to give fleet operators their Mondays back. If you can manage that effectively and know how to operate your business, it's an enabler. It's not a prohibitor for you to either enter or survive in the market.
Thanks, Jacques. Maybe just reference to Nigel's quote. Maybe if you were operating off a spreadsheet, your days as a fleet manager were numbered, and I think it's a fair statement. Just if I can pick up on one comment you made about multiple bits of technology in a fleet today, and that is what we trust that AFP will be able to provide a platform where Thembi can talk to Dex about what's working. He has a similar application, because remember, fleet managers, they're not competitors. They want to do the very best that they can. So it's a nice neutral platform. They can get expertise and knowledge. And Jacques, I can already see some guys tapping into your expertise. You look a lot younger, so you've got years to give. Dex, maybe you'd like to comment on that, please, and then we'll pick up with Thembi. I'd like to ask Thembi just to talk to the fact that how is this going to affect the way salespeople sell vehicles? Dex, to you first, please.
So in regards to the AI conversation, I think it's an interesting one, and pretty much every industry has been impacted in some shape or form. If you look on the headlines within my space, for example, they're saying AI is going to take over the job of a consultant, so we're going to be out of a job in the near future as well. So, that doom and gloom scenario, we're pretty much hearing it in all corners of the world. But what people don't recognize and understand is that AI isn't necessarily this omnipotent, all capable, solution that's going to solve every single problem in our world. And the reason why that's the case is because they don't necessarily think like a human, and they don't necessarily translate it into the realities on the ground. And I think it's exactly the same for fleet managers. AI is excellent in being able to, go through a lot of information and provide you insights. But where the rubber hits the road is when that human factor comes in to say, with this information that's been provided, what does it mean for me, my business, the people that I manage as part of the fleet, the vehicles I need to manage? And I think that's where the real value needs to come through from a fleet manager perspective, to make sure that they're able to translate it into the realities on the ground. And I think that's an important distinction that we need to highlight. Second thing is around the ecosystem. AI is only as good as the amount of information it's able to bring in. And in the context of, running, fleets of vehicles, typically what happens is you've got silos of information that's available. Now, the prime example that I always like to highlight is from the perspective of smart cities, where you don't necessarily have a traffic light that tells a vehicle when the traffic light is going to be changing. Or, for example, something's a lot more closer to home, you don't have Google Maps telling you in real time where the traffic bottlenecks are on the road that these vehicle fleets need to take into account as part of mapping their journey. And those integrations are still the parts that's missing, where the multiplier effect can be considered as part of the utilization of AI, because the more of that information starts coming together as an ecosystem, the more value starts to be realized, and more insights gets generated, and more value is produced for both driver, fleet, business, and the like. So those elements is where the industry needs to start looking towards. And I think that's where collaboration is really going to start becoming important, because at the end of the day, the more you can start coming together to be able to provide each other with the insights that you need to start producing value, that's where the multiplier effect will start coming through.
Thanks. Thembi, a short comment on selling. And in fact, do you sell to fleets?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We do sell to fleets. I think the whole technology and AIs and everything, they actually started to make life better for dealers and for the businesses. Because actually, I like the whole evolution of AI and technology when it comes to vehicle sales. Because back in the days, as a salesperson on the floor talking to a fleet manager who knows what they're talking about, they've got the data, they've got everything. We were like, the managers were here, and then there's a salesperson, you are here, because you got no idea of the cost of running the vehicle means, and you just want to sell a car. But now the conversation is different, because now I can use an AI, all right, and use the technology for me to understand what does Jacques business mean, and what does it mean to buy a car, and what terminology is he going to use, and I can prep myself as a salesperson to have a proper conversation with him in order to bring the solution that he's looking for. So I think from a dealer point of view, the AI is basically an enabler for a human being or human factor to deliver more efficient and more effective solution for the client. And I think it's fascinating, and for me, it's amazing AI and technology when it comes to into dealerships.
Thanks, Tim. I bet you outsold everybody else when you were a salesman. Dex, just before we move to this, I saw Darius raised a question about battery life, etc. I'm sure you're going to cover it, but just anecdotally, I think I heard from Greg, there's a Tesla that's in the UK that's done 300,000 miles, and the SOH on the battery is still sitting at like 70%. So the way we value vehicles, if this is a fair statement, is going to change dramatically. It's not going to be based on the kilometers. It's going to be based more on the health of the battery. So you've spent a lot of time through KPMG. You've modeled ICE vehicles against new energy vehicles. You've driven across South Africa in an EV. You still continue, and therefore, by the way, I'm a petrol head, but I appreciate EVs, but my condolences to you. So how should fleet managers be evaluating the growing range of vehicles, and what should they be thinking in terms of being forward-looking, in your opinion?
So thanks for that question. And let me just correct you with a little something. The longest riding vehicle is actually in the United States, and it is a Tesla. And it's done close onto 1.1 million kilometers on the actual battery, and the battery hasn't been changed. And the SOH on the battery is sitting, if I remember correctly, around 62%. So
I thought Musk sent that one into space.
No. I think that one's at 0 kilometers because it's a fresh battery that's in space. But, if you think about that, I mean, what vehicle do you have today within the ICE fleet that could do that many kilometers and still be mechanically sound? I don't think there's a single vehicle that I can think about that would pretty much, be able to hit that type of benchmark. So if you had to go into the conversation around batteries, and electric vehicles and what you need to look out for, I think the biggest potential risk there is really around the sheer pace that the technology is evolving. Up until a couple of years ago, we were talking about certain chemistries in battery, for example, nickel-based chemistries and so forth, and that was going to be pretty much the top of the stack and what we're going forward with. And you fast forward to today, some of the Chinese OEMs are starting to release sodium-related batteries, which is just, batteries with salt inside of them. So I think the evolution of the battery technology is going to most likely be one of the biggest risks that you need to consider as part of acquiring vehicles, because it potentially means that during the lifetime of your vehicle, there is a potential for the chemistry within the battery that you have within your vehicle to become obsolete because of the fact that all of these new technologies have been coming out, which can then ultimately impact the price of the resale value of the RV of the vehicle itself. So that will be one of those factors to consider. Second part I would also like to put on the table is in regards to autonomous driving technology. And look, I'm a great proponent of pushing AV tech into vehicles, not necessarily as a add-on feature, but as a fundamental mandatory feature from a road safety perspective. Because if you look at road accidents, by far the reason why you're having road accidents is because of human error and it's human judgment. And if we can bring in those type of technologies and ensure that every truck, every vehicle on the road has that technology to supplement the driver's behavior, that in itself will allow us to ensure less accidents. It means from an insurance company perspective, there's a potential for premiums to be reduced because the risk related to writing off vehicles, damaging vehicles becomes significantly lower. And there's a whole slew of benefits that actually comes from introducing that. So as part of a second feature on what fleet managers should be looking at is really around how can they ensure those AI-enabled, autonomous driving vehicle features will start becoming front and center as part of their purchasing decision. Because at the end of the day, if you can make sure your drivers are happier when they're driving, because they're primarily supervising a vehicle A to B versus them taking an active role in it, I think that will make a big difference for pretty much the entire fleet and for the country itself.
Thanks, Dex, and I'm glad you've moved on to autonomous vehicles to a degree. Jacques, I'll be with you in a moment. The three things that I understand is needed, at least for autonomous vehicles to operate fully. There's a level of autonomy at level 4, I think, at the moment, is stable power. Thank you, Eskom. 5G capacity, and then road markings, which the LiDAR can read. So I think we're a little bit way, but maybe the N3 will be one of those routes. Jacques, I'm going to ask you to keep your comments quite short. If you'd like to pick up from Dex, please.
Eugene, you basically said it. I think it goes back to that previous comment with regards to ideation of solution and implementation of solution in the time period between the two. The question that I'm always left with regards to moving towards automation, which I firmly believe will be a reality that we get to experience in our lifetimes, is what happens with the observation of the driver when he's not cognitively involved in the operation of the vehicle. If he's in the vehicle and he's there to take over in the moment of emergency, making sure that that driver is still cognitively applied, even though he's less active in his seat. I think there's going to definitely be a move towards making sure that driver observation through video technologies becomes more relevant, even if the driver is not physically driving but supervising the vehicle.
Thank you, Jacques. You know, when I was doing my research on autonomous vehicles, we talked to the time when pilots, when you had autopilot on, and they changed it to a degree where there is never fully automated. There's always, I think the term is pilot on watch. So somebody is supervising the technology that's there. So that's a discussion all on its own. Dex, I trust you're going to join us when we have that discussion, because it's a really interesting one. Thanks. Your thoughts over there, please, Tembi?
No, I think Jacques and Dex, they've covered all the points. But even with the autonomous vehicle of the future, there's always going to be that human touch that is needed, and I think that's something that these companies need to work on, to say you still need a man to manage in a case of emergency and all of that. More especially in South Africa with the other guys that are driving on the road. Thank you.
Yeah, it's the nut behind those wheels that we're worried about. So the wrap up, and we've got 2 minutes for each of you to comment on. What would be your closing comments or closing thoughts or your call to action for any fleet manager that is listening and viewing now and that we're going to share this information with? Jacques, let's start with you, please.
Eugene, given all the discussion on systems and platforms and integrations and EVs and automations, my answer almost seems counterintuitive. If I have to give you advice as to what you as a fleet manager must do in the next 90 days, it's got nothing to do with technology. I think you need to get closer to your driver. Don't change your telematic provider. Don't restructure your team. Spend 1 hour a week with each of your drivers in their truck, on their route, observing them. And I think 3 things are really going to happen. Your operational improvements will be better than any vendor pitch. The gap between your dashboards, what it's saying and what's actually happening, will become more relevant. And you will improve as a fleet manager, because the conversation about driver behavior stops being abstract.
Thank you. You and I sat through a presentation the other day on a line where it gave an opportunity for the driver anonymously to give feedback on the culture within an organization, because sometimes we know from a supervisor or a manager to the driver, it lacks a kind of distance. Dex, if we can have you, please.
I think I'd like to leave the message and say to fleet managers and potentially even those organizations to really think about the future. I think because everybody's continuously involved on a day-to-day basis to put out fires, they never really get to think about, what needs to be happening from a half a year from now, a year from now, 3 years from now. And, unfortunately or fortunately, the world and, the future continues to drive forward irrespective of whatever you're doing on a day-to-day basis. So just be open to the fact that, the landscape is starting to change. Technology is evolving. There's continuously new things that's coming onto the horizon. And it's really about, as an organization, preparing upfront for the transition that is expected over time, and ensuring that, whenever the transition comes along, instead of you being caught off guard and reacting to the situation, you're strategizing so that you're continuously able to be on the front foot wherever those changes are going to be coming along. So that would be my, closing comments to, leave with the audience.
Thank you. The one thing, if I can just share with you, the intention of AFP is to equip those fleet managers to be able to talk to a board and justify why there's a 40 million rand investment that they wish to make. Not about what it's costing today. And I think, Dex, you made reference, we're going to have to make an investment somewhere or other. But if they can be equipped with the skills, wherewithal, and knowledge to be able to do that successfully, then the transition, I believe, could become a lot quicker. Tembi, please.
No, thank you so much. I think my panelists have really covered quite a lot. But I think my parting shot will be, as the automotive retailers in the country, we appreciate what the fleet managers are doing for our businesses. And also we're really grateful that, with this journey of transitioning and moving with times, their patience and the level of assistance that they give dealers, it makes the dealers to look differently, and also to look at the skills differently when it comes to the business because of the engagement that they're having with the fleet managers. And secondly, it's just to say to them that the automotive industry in the country is heading in the right direction, number one. Number two, with the alternatives that are there, there's a lot and heavy investment that the franchisees in the country have put in, the investors have put in, into making sure that they are ready for whatever needs that a fleet manager might have. We talk about multi-franchise dealership currently, which is something that was not there before, whereby you've got 4 or 5 different brands in one space. And the reason for that is to make sure that when you walk into those into a members dealership, you've got so many alternatives, and those alternatives are there on the table, then, and they can be discussed. So yeah, my message is thank you so much. Continue supporting the automotive dealers in the country. It is much needed, and also the transition to electric cars and everything else. Don't be scared. The dealers got you.
Okay. Thank you. Dex, by the way, just talking about EVs, I had on test the other day the Alpha Junior Electrica. And I must tell you, it's the first EV that I've driven that's got some soul in it. So I'm on the way to being converted. All right. Tembi, just a comment to you. I do think that the salesman of tomorrow will also be changing. He's not just going to be giving out a color brochure and tell the people, oh, a white car is safer than a red car. There's other technology. And Jacques, I think you're a globetrotter at the moment. So we look forward to your input. And thank you for those insightful words. So to all of you, you've made this an absolute pleasure for me to engage with you. And thank you. If I can just leave everybody with this parting message. AFP is not about where the fleet industry is today. It's about what the fleet professional will be tomorrow. And so with that thought, I'd like to thank you very much and hand back to Nigel, who's going to talk us through some of the other ththings that we would like to share about AFP. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Eugene, what a fabulous webinar. The input from each of the gentlemen certainly tells you that some of the complexities that exist within fleet management, and more importantly, the things that are coming down the road. I think when it comes to the whole issue of EVs, it's certainly early days in South Africa, but when it comes, the impact and the changes that it's going to make to the whole fleet management infrastructure are going to be significant. And it's going to take a lot of assistance from all parties, service providers, OEMs, but it's going to be very, very interesting. Thank you again. Great conversation, guys. Thank you very much indeed. Right, okay, let's see what we're going to do now. Where do I find what I'm looking for here? Where? Stop share. I'm the wrong one there. Again, sorry. I need with you in 2 ticks. All right.
We're good fleet managers, but not good technologists.
No, it's sunny and right there we are. I've got it there. Let me take it to the one here. There we go. All right. What we're going to talk about now, Eugene, is some of the training programs that we are putting together in AFP. As I've said earlier, the AFP's one of its driving forces is training. Clearly, communication and development is part of it, but training is one of the big things for us. Okay, so let's go and run through. Okay, I trust everyone can see this. It shouldn't be too long, but let's quickly run through. Okay, we're looking at 4 areas of training. We've got online training, which we are going to run 12 programs over the next year, um, covering, we're going to start looking at some of the, should we say, the entry levels of fleet management, but we're going to get into some big issues that involve money and involve good business management practices. So it's going to be quite a wide and beneficial, I hope, training experience. We'll have specialized training. Some of the subjects we'll touch on do require further analysis, and that will be provided by specialists. We're going to do events. We have a number of events, seminars, webinars here. One other webinar still to come over. There will be regional activity. That's an important thing within AFP, that we intend to be active within the regions. So not everyone's going to catch a plane to Joburg. We want to go down and work in the areas where the fleet managers are active. Sorry, let me just go back. The other, of course, is to do webinars. And if the webinars going forward are as good as the one we've had, and the learning that we gain from these, I think they're going to be an enormous contributor to the success of AFP. Let's have a look at the online training. This just to give you an overview. There is more detailed thing. So we're going to start out, should we say, quite simply with fleet registers. But I've been a fleet management consultant now for a good many years. And you know, you go into a business and your first thing you ask them for is your fleet register. But what happens, you end up being given an asset register. And you look at that and you find that they spelled Toyota incorrectly. Isuzu's spelled with a Z or an S, whatever. So you really haven't got information that you can actively manage your fleet fund. So we're going to address some of the things that can be done there. We're going to move through right sizing and replacement. I say here, the cheapest vehicle you have is the one you don't have. It's always been a throwaway of mine, but when you, as I said earlier on, you've got a vehicle costing you 120,000 Rand a year, and you're not using it fully. You're not getting the service out of the vehicle, or maybe it's not even fit for purpose. Get rid of it and start getting your vehicle fleet to the right size, the right structure, and you will find that you will save a great deal of money. The cheapest vehicle is the one you don't have. Don't forget it. Then, of course, we touch vehicle selection. Again, a moment. Is it fit? Are your vehicles fit for purpose? I've been involved with fleets where they were operating vehicles in Polokwane. The truth of the matter is the nearest servicing dealer was in Pretoria. Okay, so it's okay to drive 300 odd Ks to go and get your vehicle serviced. Not very clever, of course. Finance methods, lots of things to discuss there, lots of detail. Fleet management information systems. I've seen one of the comments or one of the chats that have come through saying you can't manage what you can't measure. And if you haven't got decent information systems, you really can't make the business decisions, the operating decisions that you need to make. Fuel management, what do I need to say? A 5% saving is significant. I've worked with fleets and we've saved to 15, sometimes even, yes, certainly 15. Let's call 15 the tops. That is a lot of money. Okay, maintenance management. I said earlier on, probably one of the easiest things to manage. The savings are there, a minimum of 5. We've managed fleets in my business experience. We had savings of 25%. Opportunities here save a great deal of money. Telematics utilization, one of my favorite subjects, superb technology, not fully utilized. Many fleets are not enjoying the benefits that they can obtain from telematic systems. Outsourcing, always a debate, good debate, something worth looking at. So this gives an idea of the free online training programs they have. They'll all run for an hour. They will be recorded and they will be available on the AFP website after they've been published. Okay, then as I say, this is the specialized training I was a moment ago, expert-led, practical applications, and here we're going to be looking, as I say, this is an interesting one, legal obligations. R2 is a case in point, Road Traffic Act, lots of requirements, specialized training. Supply chain and logistics, again, expert-led, practical applications. It all adds up. Everything you do in fleet, if you do it well, it all adds up to efficiency. It all adds up to cost saving. We'll look at the OEM and vehicle acquisition strategy. That is, as I said a moment ago, that's vehicle selections. And when the market does move to electric vehicles, the challenges that you're going to face are enormous, really from a planning, from an investment opportunity, as was said earlier on. Motor vehicles are always expensive. Now let's talk about the infrastructure to enable you to use those vehicles fully and efficiently. That is another great deal of cost, but it has to be planned and it has to be strategized. Programs like this will give you that benefit. We'll have events, we have quarterly hybrid sessions, we'll have an annual conference, regional chapters. I place a great deal of emphasis on this because I think these are very, very important. And then we'll do presentations and sponsorship opportunities. As I said earlier on, our service providers are massively important to the fleet industry. They have access to new developments, and of course they are keen to follow up and support the commercial opportunities by addressing the fleet. So there you go. So that's the sort of thing we'll do. Webinars. What more do I say? You've just had an extremely good example of what can and will be achieved in our webinars. So that gives you an overview of the training that we're coming down. We're very happy with it. We are very excited about what we've put together. So yes, it's available to members. All right, then of course the other point I'd look at is the membership overview. Okay. Again, a great deal of thought has gone into this. We're looking here at 6 categories of membership. Our core is our fleet professionals, the individuals who are practicing fleet daily, who are making sure that things adhere to processes and support the business that they manage. Fleet professional, vitally important. We're also looking at corporate fleets. Many fleets do in fact have a number of individuals running fleets, especially the larger ones. So we have a structure for corporates. And on the right-hand side, service and product providers. What we've endeavored to do here is we know that different service providers have different requirements. They have different financial capabilities. They have different product and service capabilities. So we've put together. Let me just close this down if I can. So we've got 3 levels. We've got bronze, silver, and gold. Different costs. With each cost level comes different and greater access to benefits and interactions with members. So this is all clearly spelled out. It's all clearly spelled out in our benefit mention. we have a category here called principal members. A lot of businesses out there that are actively involved in the fleet management industry, they want to take a leading position. They want to have greater access than somebody who is operating in different greater or smaller spheres. So principal member, this person is, this team, this business is going to have very, very wide, perhaps unlimited access to the members of AFP. And we're looking to them to also give us guidance in the development of the AFP. So there we go. So every tier delivers immediate benefit, immediate value from day one. That's very, very important. The organization is ready and we are able to move as soon as we take on members. As I said a moment ago, online training, events, quarterly seminars, I'm repeating myself, but that's what we are. And we're very proud of what's being developed. Marketing and brand visibility, supplier listings, presentation, and sponsorship opportunities. So this is the process. If you haven't seen it already, there is the website address for AFP. It has or will be published shortly. So how to become a member. Choose the tier that you want to join. One of 6 memberships, as I said earlier. You complete the application, make your payment, the account will be activated, and you start learning. You start learning, you start interacting, and start gaining from the benefits of AFP. Okay, here we go. Learn, connect, and lead. So I think AFP is very exciting. I personally am extremely excited about what can be done and what will be done with AFP. But most importantly here is that I'm sure that some of you are listening and saying, hold on, this is a great opportunity for me, for my business to participate. So we welcome you to come and say just new opportunity, new point of discussion here. Our business, we can add value to AFP. So please approach us. We're listening. We want your participation. Early days, but I do strongly believe that the end result will deliver enormous benefits to the fleet industry in South Africa. And as I said a moment right in the beginning of my presentation, I think it's undervalued. I think it's massively undervalued in terms of cost, in terms of skill, in terms of benefit that you deliver to organizations. So let's make AFP fly. I welcome your participation. We welcome your participation. And thank you for your time today. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you indeed. I think now I need to hand over to Jonathan, who I'm sure will give us some closing remarks and give us his thoughts after all of our presentation, give us his thoughts on what he sees for the future of AFP. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Nigel. What a morning. I want to take a moment to reflect on what we've just heard before we close out. 3 factors, big factors that came out today's discussion. Of course, the one that's preeminent in everyone's mind right now, the fuel cost crisis. We've heard that the government is also trying to take away the sort of benchmark that they helped us with to reduce cost. But the fuel cost is such a big thing for fleet managers. The rise of new brands, different types of brands that are coming into the market, and also this transition to new energy vehicles or electric vehicles. It's not just an abstract trend. These are the realities that as a fleet manager and all fleet managers, we wake up on how to transition, how to inculcate, what is fit for purpose, what is the costing, how to discuss, as it was mentioned in the panel, with the different boards and make them understand the difference between CPK and total cost of ownership. ownership and the availability of capital to make sure that one augments that particular organization. And that is what AFP is there for. Not just to give one answer, but to make sure you are part of the conversation where answers are being shaped. We heard about engaging with government in different levels, asking for their help in order to make sure that this transition happens and happens in the right way to augment the actual economy. Because what fleet managers do help keeps the economy going forward. A sincere thank you from my side and the rest of the team to our panelists, Mr. Tembinkosi Pansi, Dex Makeda, Jacques Riefer, and of course our moderator, Mr. Eugene Herbert, for keeping the conversation light and productive. Gentlemen, I want to thank you. That was excellent. Then comes the other part. So what's next? Uh, we will have another, as Nigel has alluded to, we will have another AFP masterclass coming soon. And I'm glad to announce that our masterclass session one will be on asset registers and fleet audits. And that will take place on Tuesday, the 24th of June, 2026. This is a practical, hands-on training that's specifically for the fleet professionals. If you manage assets and you want to do better, this session is for you. Also, if you're an RTMS accredited fleet management company, you will know the importance of making sure from a regulatory compliance, from a financial asset register perspective, this is what you need to have in place for your fleets. There will be a follow-up email from us today challenging you to sign up early. And please share that far and wide with all the colleagues and everyone in the fleet industry so that we can make fleets better in South Africa. That brings us to the next exciting part of our program and towards the close, the prize giving. And now I want to take a moment to thank the team keeping an eye on the chat for us. And these prizes are sponsored by our business partners and these individual organizations that have always supported Master Drive and also support the inception of the Association of Fleet Professionals. I want to thank Castrol, MAG, Master Drive, and the Optics Group. Thank you for your generosity and supporting this great, incredible master series and also providing these hampers. So, drum roll, virtual drum roll, we're going to now read out the winners of these incredible hampers. Apologies if I get your name pronunciation incorrect, but we will be happy with you. I'm sure the prize will make it all the while better to have attended this webinar with us. So number one, Gravel Salmon, Johnny Homo, Brian Rangsemi, David Britz, Nompilo Bekwa, Lizelle Jansen, Mampile Dlamini, Berend Udrenai, Ernest Nodier, Harry Naidu, Alida Travis, Warwick Rashford, Javid Hussein, Levin Hussein, and Nadine Swart. So I want to congratulate all our winners. Thank you so much for participating and being there with us. To each and every one of them, our team from AFP will be in touch today with the details and how you can claim your prize. Before I sign off, I want to say a thank you, a genuine thank you to every one of you for attending the call today. You absolutely showed up on a Thursday morning for this industry, hosted by the organization that is not just there for this event, but is there for the long haul. That means something. That's real commitment. Thank you to Eugene Herbert and the Master Drive team and Nishani as well and her team making sure that we make AFP possible. Thank you to our GM, Nigel Webb, for his enormous work in the background and all the other team members that are involved in making this webinar better. The AFP mission is to build resiliency. is to connect the professionals, empower the fleet managers and the community in South Africa. The conversation will go on the 24th for the next one. To everyone, drive safely, take care of yourselves and your teams. We look forward to having you again. Just a last note from my side. As a fleet manager and a person who's been involved in several organizations, excellence is something that is worthwhile, the pursuit of it. And I want to encourage you as we walk, drive, navigate this journey to fleet excellence. You are not just helping your organization, but you're helping all South Africans. The conversation, for me, I can summarize it in a formula or in a framework I believe in. It's people, it's process, and technology. And now it's also community. I thank you very much and bid you a great morning. Thank you very much for all attending. You please have a wonderful day further. That's from me, myself, Jonathan Mpake, the National Fleet Manager for SPV, Vice President of AFP, and also a Director at the Supply Chain Industry, SAPEX as well. Wishing you a great day further. Thank you very much. Have a great day further. Thanks.